Hey guys, I wanted to do a quick review or feedback on the Synergy JL steering bracket. I bought one of these because the ratings were real good. Everybody loved them. Even Way of Life installed them, so I got one to help improve my steering. I do have 37-inch tires on. My wife drives it on the highway, so good steering is important to me. So I installed this probably 3, maybe 4 weeks ago. Before a trip, I went from Austin up to Colorado to hit the San Juan Mountains. And on the way, I stopped by Bridgeport OHV Park, which is now one of the Jeep Honor Trails. And just hit some basic trails. I didn't want to do anything crazy because I had a long drive and a bunch of mountain trails to go on before I got back home. So I went on some basic trails there, ended up in deeper water and mud than I wanted to, and anyways, it went well. Went through, did a couple other trails there, and then I drove probably five more hours to a hotel. I stopped, and when I came out the next morning, my Jeep was making a terrible squeaking noise. And I just saw videos on Facebook, somebody else with this bracket that had that squeaking noise. So I knew that it was this bushing. I had my wife move the steering, and I looked, and it confirmed it. And what I'm finding out here is that the top side of this bracket that they give you isn't sealed at all, so you could see where mud had gotten into it. And what it does is it goes down into the bushing here, and any grease that was in there comes out as the mud and water goes in. The steering also gets kind of hot, which is one of the reasons they put steering coolers on vehicles. So when you get your steering hot, the grease is hot, and you start dumping mud and water into it, it's going to dry out this bushing. So just like other people have expressed, you can see this bushing has slid, and the grease fitting is no longer, you can't grease it, right? So I just had to take it off. Right now, this, with even the drive up to Bridgeport, Texas, this is under like 1,000 miles here, and on the highway and everything, it was great. It did as expected, helped with steering. I don't disagree with that. However, it definitely has a fatal flaw here where you can see mud just goes right into the bushing. Why do they do this? Probably because there just isn't enough room to put a real bearing, a sealed bearing in here. However, as you can see here, it's not really good for off-roading. So the best thing I would recommend is, if you want to run one of these to get better highway steering, is when you go off-roading, definitely take it off. I did try to spray some grease into it, some WD-40. It kind of cleaned it out a little bit and helped with the squeaking, but before I went and hit the trails in the mountains, I just pulled it off. And what's funny is I met up with a buddy in the mountains who also has one of these brackets, who installed it around the same time. He was doing a off-road overlanding trip through New Mexico, and we ended up meeting in the mountains. He said his lasted a few days and it started doing the squeaking. He also pulled his off. So I mean, it's just really a bad design if you're gonna go off-roading. I know some people say you need to maintain it, but if you got to maintain it more than 1,000 miles, then it's not usable for me, right? And I'm sure that if you just mall crawl or whatever, only want this for the highway, that's one thing. But it definitely sucks when it comes to off-roading, because you can see it didn't keep any of this mud out. It just goes right into it. They also didn't put a channel in here for the grease with a couple holes. So now at this point, you can't actually grease it. I tried to grease it. You can see where some of it squirted out, and I had to go on the road. Luckily, there was a store, and I tried to get some like marine axle grease that supposed to help keep water out more than just normal bearing grease, but I couldn't even get it in there because it spun itself. However, if they put a channel in here and maybe had like 4 holes, then maybe I could have greased it on the road. But at this point, you have to just take it out and repair it. So, you know, I'm assuming that they didn't put a sealed bearing in there, you know, maybe just because there isn't enough room. So, you know, maybe they could, but you wouldn't be able to get it on there. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I just took it off because it wasn't worth dealing with, you know, having suspension components that are going to fail on me, you know, especially when you're driving on the side of a cliff. You want to make sure your steering works. So that's my feedback on it. You know, if you want to buy one, I guess you know, you can. But just be aware, if you go off-roading, I would take it off. You know, this comes off pretty easy with 2 bolts, so maybe it's kind of like end links. You pop them off before you go off-roading. I do have a rough country traction bar here. It's got this extra little lip, so you have to have somebody pull up on the front bumper or jack it up to get this out. But I would definitely pull this off before you go off-roading, or you're just gonna fill it with grease, because there's no seal up here to keep any of the elements out. I would say after I went off-roading, I did stop by the car wash and I did spray everything. I wasn't really intending to go mudding. It just kind of got on a trail that had more mud than I had anticipated, deeper than I thought. So anyways, yeah, that's my feedback. Everybody says how great it is. You know, as far as going down the highway, I would say that's true, but for off-roading, you know, take it off like your sway bar links. And I would note too, when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, that's kind of silly, there's only one grease hole here. So I put wheel bearing grease all the way around it before I installed it, and then hit it with the grease gun with somebody turning the wheel. So it had plenty of grease. It just, you know, failed quickly for me. So anyways, thanks.